Tools. We got them. We love them. We use them. We forget about them. We put them in the drawer. They get dusty. We open the drawer. We say, I forgot about you, tool. It's so nice to see you again. That's what this episode is about. Tools for dealing with stress, for building up our baseline, for dealing with really crappy things in the moment, and also feeling better over time. I love talking about this stuff. I hope you find this episode really useful. Let's open up our drawers, see what we already had that we forgot about, maybe find some new tools, try out some new things. It's the new year. Well, by this time you're listening to this, it's probably about a month into the new year, but hey, every day is a new day. Let's talk about tools. We got cool jobs. We do cool things. Our work should be magical. Welcome to STEMdenity. I'm your host, Anna Hodshire. We work really hard and our jobs shouldn't suck. Let's dive in. Y'all, have you ever noticed how much life is something like learning to drive a car? So bear with me here. Think back to your days when you learned to drive a car. Could have been 15, 20 years ago, could have been really recently. Doesn't matter. When you first get to drive a car, right? And you're sort of told these theoretical things, and then you're handed this large device, and you're told some, sort of nonsensical things about like keep your hands at 4 and 12. Those numbers are almost certainly wrong, so don't learn how to drive from me. But right, some sort of clock time, and you're given some basic like this is the gas, this is the brake, etc. Now go for it. And when you first start off, like that can actually be a lot. That can be really overwhelming, in fact. But hey, you know what? You start going for it. You take your time. You learn in a controlled environment, hopefully, or in a safe environment where there's nothing around that you can hit. And you start to get better. And sure enough, soon enough, you're somewhat on autopilot when it comes to just simple driving, say, around your local town or city that you live in. That being said, every time you hit a new condition, all of a sudden you have to start relearning or learning a few new skills. So let's say that you grew up to drive somewhere really flat, like the Midwest, or your city is really flat. And so now you're quite good at driving in straight lines, maybe some gentle curvy lines, but you've never really had to deal with much else past that. Now, let's say a rainstorm happens and the visibility starts to drop. Right now, you need to start to understand, okay, how do I feel safe when I'm driving when there's not great visibility and I'm driving along and, there's all this rain. Do I need to slow down? Maybe the word hydroplaning pops into your mind and you go, what the hell is hydroplaning? I heard about it once. Is it when your wheels, slip out, whatever, right? And so maybe you're starting to panic yourself a little bit, but hopefully you're having a good enough experience that, you get past the rainy spot, the rain stops, or you get to where you're going, and you can look back and say, hey, okay, all right, that wasn't too bad. It was maybe a little better than I thought it would be. And sure enough, you start to get better and better at driving in the rain. All right, now let's say that once again, you learned how to drive somewhere reasonably flat, no real topography challenges, and you have an opportunity to go somewhere else. And I think this is where life is very sneakily like learning how to drive a car. Let's say that somewhere else is the mountains. All right. Now, usually, if you're coming from somewhere flat to the mountains, that means you're going to go up first. Okay. Pretty obvious, right? So let's say that you are in the United States and you're coming from, say, Kansas or Eastern Colorado, and you're hitting the Rocky Mountains. All right. So you start to climb up. And now this is going to use a few more skills than just driving in the flat. In theory, you're having to accelerate a little harder than you're used to. There might be some more curves than you're used to. But very quickly, you start to pick up, okay, this is mountain driving going up a hill. It's actually not that different. It's not that bad. It requires a little bit more attention, a little bit more skill, but I'm okay. I'm doing all right. All right, so let's say that you are doing some really ambitious drive in the Rockies. So you're going up, 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 up. And then you reach some sort of pass, and maybe you get to pull off and step out of the car and look around, and it's really gorgeous. And you're really proud of yourself that you made it here, and you're happy, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, gorgeous scenery. And then the next thing you need to do is go down, 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 right? You need to go down the hill. Great, no worries. You went up the hill. It wasn't that hard. Now you got to go down the hill. And in theory, all you have to do is, not go out of control speed-wise so that you go flying off the side of the mountain. Okay, not so hard. So you start driving down and you're like, yep, I got this. I never was told how to drive in the mountains because, say, my parents grew up in flatlands. They never told me anything. I never sought out any information, but it's fine. I have my brakes. No worries. I got this. You start hitting your brakes, and then you're like, oh, wow, car really accelerates fast when you're going downhill. So I got to hit my brakes a little bit more. And now I'll note that this analogy is more for a gas-powered car than an electric car. So just, put your brain in the gas-powered car. You have like actual braking action. Um, all right, so you're braking, and then you brake some more, 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 and all of a sudden you start to smell something. Oh, shit. Yeah, that's right. You burned your brakes out. Why'd you burn your brakes out? Because no one told you that when you're driving the mountains and you're going downhill, that you can burn your brakes out and that there's a better tool on your car and it's using your gears, right? You just start to shift into a lower gear and your car slows itself down without using its brakes, right? If no one told you this, of course you don't know it, and of course you burn your brakes out. And this is how life is like learning how to drive a car, because you can be going along and think, okay, everything's okay. Some new challenges came at me, some rainstorms came at me, but I did all right, and I didn't really have to change what I was doing, right? I just slowed down a little bit or, accelerated a little bit up the hill, paid a little bit more attention, but it was fine. Yeah, I was maybe a little bit more stressed, but again, it was fine. Everything was fine. Everything was fine. Oh, my brakes burned out. And that's life, right? We're all cruising along, and some of us are given the mountain driving very early on when we were born or young, right? And so things started to build up really fast. Others of us maybe had a very solid, nurturing childhood. We had challenges, but nothing too crazy. And then, maybe we entered a new job, a new school, something that made us suddenly start to drive down that hill and start to accelerate out of control and hit the brakes until we literally either burned ourselves out or we barely coasted to the bottom with just a tiny amount of brake left, right? Like if you'd had, one more mile to go, your brakes would have burned out. And that's not a sustainable way of living, guys. This is why we need resources. This is why we need resources, just like using your shifters in your car. They're probably not called shifters. I'm not really a car person, so bear with me. You're shifting gears. Yeah, sure, your gears in your car, right? You need tools to help you when things get more and more challenging. Because probably by now you've realized, life is not necessarily getting less challenging if you're excited and you want to grow and you want to do things. If you have a growth mindset towards what you're doing for your STEM job, then chances are things are getting steadily more challenging. And yeah, hopefully those challenges are coming at a steady enough pace that you feel like I can handle this. All right, I learned how to do this one new thing. I got it. It's on autopilot. Now I'm going to learn how to do this next new thing. I got it. It's on autopilot. But in reality, and as most of you can probably attest, life usually doesn't happen that way. Yeah, usually, you reach some sort of set point-ish, and then you kind of step change into the next thing, and that dumps a bunch of things on your plate. So instead of it being a manageable, slow, steady growth over time, slow, steady changes over time, it's all sorts of new things all at once. Or maybe your job is pretty manageable, but something in your life happens outside of your job that is really stressful, that is piling on a bunch of things. So all of a sudden, the things that you thought were reasonably manageable in your job are not manageable anymore. This is why we need tools to be resilient, grounded, regulated. So I've heard these tools called a lot of different things. I personally like the word resourced. I might change my mind over time about that, but for now, often if I'm referring to resourcing, this is what I'm talking about. But it's literally just a toolbox, right? And this resourcing toolbox can be as big as you want it to be, and it can be as small as you want it to be, as long as it's not nothing, right? So I am not a particularly hands-on person. I live in the abstract. I don't really go out into the world and think I can build things with my hands. I'm like, no, thank you. I can think about things. I can talk about things. I can type some stuff up on my computer. I can do some coding. I can play with data in the abstract once it's already been collected. But if you were to send me out into the field to collect that data for whatever, air quality, animal ecology, medical things, no, I'm not that hands-on person. So my toolbox, my physical toolbox at home, is not that large, right? I've got a hammer and I've got a few screwdrivers, definitely one of each type. The Phillips and the other one. Yep, those are the tools I have. I probably have some pliers because those are pretty useful, and that's about it. Okay, so my physical toolbox, it has a few things and it's just enough to get me by. But if something complicated were to come along that required a fancy tool, I'd be fish out of water, right? I'd be screwed. My partner, on the other hand, he has worked many jobs as a mechanic, and he has this toolbox thing kit. I don't know what to even call it. It's like a cabinet on wheels, and it's as tall as I am. I'm 5'5". And it's not as tall as I am, but it's close to as tall as I am. And it has drawers, and things are organized. Every drawer you pull out, there's different kinds of tools, and there's like 8 different sizes of wrenches, and it's he is incredibly resourced when it comes to his physical toolbox. And I am sitting here telling you, hey guys, the more resourced we are when it comes to our emotional, mental resilience, grounding, regulation toolbox, the better things are going to be at work. So let me tell you just briefly my own story of how I came to this, resourcing framework of mind. Same analogy to the car. And as a quick trigger warning, briefly going to touch on suicide and eating disorders. So when I was a kid, I had a somewhat challenging father. He had a really explosive temper that kind of came out of nowhere. What I mean by that is, things would be fine, and all of a sudden, rage. And I'm sure some of you can empathize with this. You either have family members like this, you've been around people like this, or maybe you struggle with this yourself. And frankly, I struggle with this myself a little bit, right? I have a bit of a flashpoint temper. I work really, really hard to keep that controlled. Okay, so childhood was a little bit challenging. When I was a teenager, about 13, I started to develop an eating disorder in order to feel like I had control around my world around me. And it worked really well. It wasn't a horrible eating disorder, right? I was still eating, but I was exercising a lot, and it's, it was starting to become more and more of a problem. Okay, on top of that, 2 years later, my father committed suicide. It was incredibly traumatic, as you might imagine. And I completely spiraled into that eating disorder and into school because school was the other thing that I felt like I had pretty good control on. I was really good at school. I could get good grades. My teachers liked me. They made me feel validated, seen, important. So I went all in because my body and brain were like, we are not handling what is happening. We are not thinking about what happened. We are not processing emotions. Emotions are dangerous. That was the story I was told as a child from observation, right? My father could just be doing something and then all of a sudden explode in anger. Emotions are danger, is what my body and brain learned from all of that experience. So eating disorder in school was a great way of avoiding everything because I could completely physically exhaust my body and I can completely physically exhaust my brain. And therefore, no need to feel anything, right? No need to have emotions. Everything was fine. Okay, going to the car analogy, this is like me going down the mountain, down, 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 down. The car is accelerating. I have at least taken my foot off the brake or the accelerator, so I'm not, continually accelerating more. But I've grabbed a tire iron and I've opened the car door and I'm dragging the tire iron on the ground to slow myself down. Okay, completely ineffective, immediately destructive to my body, and long-term destructive more and more and more over time. The longer I have my arm out of the car door, dragging a tire iron, trying to slow down this car hurtling down the mountain. Now, fortunately, my brain and body did want to survive, and I was able to cling to a few things that kind of kept me above water. Music was a big one. In fact, music was really my savior, I would say, especially as I transitioned from high school to college, where I threw myself into a really hard degree, hard for me, hard degree. I started to play music more. I was invited to play with my brother's bands, which was awesome for me. I started to get a friend group that was kind of outside of the people I knew that I had a hard time relating with at that point because I was so heavily wrapped up in all of these things that were going on inside of me. So music was the one place where I could feel myself. I didn't have to worry about, was I eating enough or not enough? Was I exercising enough or not enough? How was school going, right? It was just music. It was so good. And that was my brain and body saying, hey, you need a resource. You need something because otherwise you're gonna fucking die. You are going to die, girl. Play some music, listen to some music, dance a little bit in your body, feel a little bit of joy. So our bodies and brains are brilliant, right? For the most part, they want to survive. They're going to do what they can. And you probably, even if you have no resources at this point in time that you think of, you're probably like, yeah, okay. I do this thing that makes me feel alive and makes me feel happy. And that is so important. Those things are your North Stars. Vector to them, point to them, find them, keep them in your lives. I was also able to heal my relationship with movement enough to use movement as more stress relief than a punishment, a tool for controlling how my body looked and for, keeping emotions away from me. But I still never really, for years and years, I never really embraced any emotions that were not sort of the light ones of frankly, irritability and a little bit of happiness, right? I kind of just oscillated between those ends. I was like, yeah, I can be kind of irritable or I can be kind of happy and having a good time. Certainly, I did a little bit of drinking and partying with the music crew I was with, and that gave me sort of a false sense of more happiness, which, okay, not a great tool, but here we are again, brain, body trying to survive. But it really wasn't until after graduate school, so just a few years ago, that I finally was like, you know what? I am tired of being so freaking irritable all the time. Like I have these people in my life that I love and I'm just annoyed with them. I am fed up. I can't like interact with them well. I got to seek a better tool. So that's when I started therapy. And then the therapy journey led into a lot of different avenues because it started to open my mind to, okay, there's a lot of tools out there. Like I say, right? Your physical toolbox can have, just a hammer and a couple screwdrivers, or it can be a cabinet as tall as a person full of drawers of different tools. Therapy also, so therapy was a tool, right? And it was really helpful. Once a week, I would talk to someone and we sort of dig in, but it wasn't enough, right? I was still struggling with a lot of things. And so I was able to start to explore, especially over the last couple of years, a lot of different modalities and just start to treat this as a science experiment, right? Like we are all scientists and engineers, and we can use this innate curiosity and creativity to keep pointing ourselves towards the life we want. And artists, don't forget, we're all artists too. And so I was able to start to treat this as an experiment. Like, hey, I wonder if I tried this thing, how would it help me? And I've always been a person who likes self-help is it has a bad connotation, I would say at this point. But I like that more self-helpy, but practical and useful type of world. So I was listening to some podcasts, I was reading some books, and I started to pick up on these little tools. And so I now have a framework in my mind that I'm going to share with you today, which is that for me, at this point in my life, I have two big categories of tools. One category is tools that are really good at building a strong foundation, and the other category is tools that are really good at dealing with crises in the moment. So let's break them down. The strong foundation ones. So by a strong foundation, I mean tools that are going to help you become more resilient over time, build you up over time. They might be helpful in the moment to make you feel a little bit better, but really their power, their true strength comes in from time. So I think the most popular one that you're going to like, yeah, okay, I've heard of that. I've maybe done a little bit here or there. Maybe you already have a great practice around this is meditation, right? Meditation is really popular in pop culture. And I think it's great. And one thing I do want to do actually with this episode is really focus on free tools, right? I think that therapy coaches working with other people is incredibly important, but also maybe you're not ready for that. Maybe you don't have the resources for that. Maybe you just want to walk away from this episode with something that makes you feel like, hey, I could do this today. I don't have to go find a coach or a therapist, or I already have a coach and a therapist, or whatever that looks like. Whatever it looks like that you're going, hey, I've got a little bit, but it's not enough. This episode is for you, right? So free tools of the strong foundation, meditation being one. There's so many free meditations out there, right? You can go to YouTube, you can go to different apps. I have used different apps. There are some paid apps. I've used paid apps. I'm actually going to do a separate episode on meditation because I finally found a style of meditation that worked for me about 5 months ago. And I have been doing it every day consistently, which is 4 months and about 25 days, longer than I can say that I've done any other meditation consistently. Um, you might be one of those people who's like, meditation's just not for me. It's boring. It takes too much time. Ba, 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 ba. Great. Let's dive in a separate episode because I do want to say, yeah, I've felt all those things. I've thought all those things. And also, here's why I think it's really important. And here's how I have found a tool that works for me. Here's some things to consider that might work for you. So, meditation builds you up over time because it starts to help shift you into, for me at least, what I've observed, the studies I've heard, it shifts you into a more steady framework of mind, right? Makes you a little bit more resilient. Something comes along, and maybe after meditating for a month, that same thing comes along, and you're like, hey, this isn't as bad. This isn't bothering me as much. That being said, how I used to treat meditation is I'd be in a period of extra stress, work, life, whatever, and I'd be like, oh shoot, I should probably meditate. And so, maybe I'd meditate 3 days that week. And right after that meditation, which frankly, most of the meditations I was doing is mindfulness exercises, which is a little bit different than meditation. That's all right. We'll dig into it later. Don't even worry about it. We'll just lump it all into the same thing for right now. Right after that meditation or mindfulness exercise, I'd be like, yeah, all right, I feel a little bit better, but then I just sort of go back and, things would basically feel like they fall apart. What I've noticed after meditating for several months in a row is that now I'm like, yeah, all right, I actually do have a better foundation. I am stronger. I can, like my brain, I'm literally flexing that focus, that return to attention, and it is responding, and that's gorgeous. Meditation is often awesome. Couple other things that you've probably also heard of in terms of just like general mental health, regular movement, right? Our bodies are meant to move. And also, depending on where you're at in your life, you might not have a ton of time and or you might not have the ability, right? You might have some sort of physical thing, some health thing that's keeping you from doing as much movement as you would like. And that's why I think it's really important to be like, hey, there's actually so many other tools out there. Because I think some people tend to get on some sort of, platform of if you're not doing this every day, then good luck being a good human being. Good luck having, a nice time out there because you're not able to go, do HIIT exercises for 40 minutes every day. You're screwed, right? I think that's nonsense. Every single human is different. This is why we're using our science brain, our engineering brain to explore, to experiment, and to create the right frameworks for us. So I am a big fan of regular movement. I have dogs. I walk them every day. I have my own exercise routine because physical fitness is important and fun to me. Hello, Kitty. Sorry, Kitty just walked into the room. But I'm not going to say that it's the most important thing ever. I'm going to close my door. So pardon me if you hear a little bit of background noise. All right, couple other of these tools around the strong foundation is socializing, right? And again, this is something that it's not for everyone. Maybe you have just moved and it's hard for you to socialize, or maybe you're in a time of life where, you feel like a lot of your friends are in a slightly different space than you are. Either they have kids and you don't, or vice versa, right? And so your socializing has gone downhill a little bit. I think it's amazing. It's really relaxing for me to be able to talk to my girlfriends, to be able to bitch it out about whatever I need to bitch it out about. But again, it's not the only tool out there. So don't feel like, oh, I'm never going to be resourced. I'm never going to have a strong foundation. If you're going through a period of life where it's hard or harder for you to make connections socially. Another one is just general good personal care, right? Hydration. Drink your freaking water. Come on, guys. It's not that hard. I know water's boring. I actually drink almost no water in a day. I just drink a ton of tea. I love tea. It's my favorite. Yeah, maybe my teeth aren't as white and shiny as they could be because I drink so much tea, but whatever. I don't care. I'm very well hydrated. Also, meals, right? Eat real meals with protein, fat, and fiber. If you haven't heard this one before, protein, fat, fiber, right? PFF. Dude, I used to be a chronic snacker. I get it. I loved it. I was like, oh, I could just snack like small things every 2 hours, like a small child. And admittedly, I still do eat every about 2 to 4 hours, but when I do, I try to eat big, 3 big meals and then maybe the occasional snack. And it's helped so much. Blood sugar stability is a real thing. If your blood sugar is all over the place because you're either eating things that are perhaps high glycemic, and you can look up glycemic index of foods. So maybe, your blood sugar is getting spiked, or you're just eating things that are solo. So, if you only ate, say, some melon, which is pretty high glycemic, right? Your blood sugar is going to spike a little bit and then drop. And then you might notice that your energy also kind of, and then, right? Goes up, goes down. If you feel like your energy is all over the place in a day and you're like kind of cranky and excited and blah, blah, maybe consider doing a quick audit on how you're eating. Hey, how am I eating? Am I eating kind of erratically? Do I forget to eat meals? Do I skip meals? Am I eating pretty consistently, but maybe my meals aren't particularly balanced with protein, fat, and fiber every single meal? That could be actually a pretty good place to look at because I've also over the last year focused on this aspect of my life and I feel like my energy can be pretty steady. When it used to be every day at about 11 o'clock in the morning, I would contemplate to myself, wow, I am so tired that I don't know how I'm going to make it. I don't know how I'm going to make it through the rest of this day. And then by, 11:30 or so, I'd sort of snap out of it. But I don't really get that anymore, which is awesome. I love not having to, struggle with just being super tired because I ate some sort of stupid breakfast that was not particularly helpful. And by stupid breakfast, I just mean it was an unbalanced meal, right? Okay, so strong foundation builds you up over time. I feel like these are the things that are talked about the most. Meditation, movement, socializing, eat good meals, hydration, right? Probably none of these are a big surprise to you. You're like, yeah, all right, either I do some of this or I've heard some of this. And maybe you're sitting there going, Anna, I do basically all of these things on this list. And I still feel like when something happens, I'm just struggling to be okay in the moment. And this is where the other tools comes in. The tools that are better at dealing with things in the moment, crises in the moment, small things that come up that are gonna, make you emotionally dysregulated temporarily. They're these things that snap you back to the here and now. I think they're a little bit less talked about in pop culture, depending on the circles you run in. Maybe some of this is also going to be review. But for me, I had not really started to hear this until I started to listen to certain types of podcasts, certain types of people. And it was a game changer. So techniques here, one big one I would say are breathing techniques. And I think a key about the tools that are sort of, for the things in the moment is that they also help you build your resilience over time. But I feel like for me, at least, what I've observed personally, when I deploy them on myself, I'm like, oh yeah, I feel better now, right? It doesn't matter if I get to meditate for 15 minutes in 3 hours away from where I am right here in time. If I'm currently giving a very stressful talk that I know is going to lead to either getting, you know, $800,000 in funding or not. This is true story, happened like a month ago for me. Okay, that meditation in the future, that's not freaking helping me. What I need is something to snap me back here to the here and now. So breathing techniques. One major one that I use all the time that I absolutely love, and this is actually probably the first thing that started to snap me into, hey, there are these things that can actually like get you right back here. It's called the physiological sigh. Sorry for all the snapping, but I do find snapping to be helpful for like bring it back in. Okay. So physiological sigh, this has been extensively studied. I know that Stanford, a couple labs at Stanford have done studies on it. I will link in the show notes a couple notes on this. If you listen to the Huberman lab, Andrew Huberman, works at Stanford, professor at Stanford, has done research on the physiological sigh. And this one it's honestly my favorite. So I'm going to explain it, how you do it, and then talk about it a little bit more. I currently have my adult kitty joining me on the bed. So if you hear some purrs or sneezes, that's what's going on over there. Everybody's got a little bit of a cold in the house because the kittens have colds. So she's a bit sneezy. All right. So physiological sigh, how you do it is you take one big breath through your nose, almost a full, and then you take one more little sip at the top, and then you exhale through your mouth. And the way I'm recording, I don't know if it's actually going to record those noises because it does a pretty good job of cutting out the background. So hopefully you can kind of hear it, not to an annoying extent. But once again, so breathe in through your nose, big, big, big breath in through your nose. One more small breath at the top, and then one slow breath out your mouth. When I first learned about the physiological sigh, and some people call it cyclic sighing as well, I started deploying it when I was driving, right? Those little incidences in traffic when something happens and it's a little bit scary for just a sec, and you have that surge of emotion, sorry, not emotions, hormones, probably cortisol, right? I'm not necessarily great on which hormones happen when different things happen, right? You get that surge of, I think, cortisol, that rush, that fear. If I do about 3 to 5 physiological sighs in a row, I feel a lot better. I'm like, okay, we're good. So what's happening with the physiological sigh, to my understanding, and again, go check out those Huberman Lab resources. He has episodes where he talks about this. They're excellent. But when you breathe in, you are someone activating your sympathetic system, nervous system, excuse me, which is the fight or flight system. And then when you breathe out, you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest part of your system in pop culture terms. So if you take a longer out breath than an in breath, that means that you are activating your parasympathetic more than you're activating your sympathetic system, right? So big, long exhale just activates that parasympathetic more, tells your body, hey, we're okay, right? If you were on the Serengeti and you're running away from a tiger, are you really going to be able to take long, slow breaths out your mouth? No, you're going to be breathing really fast as you're running as hard as you can to get away from the tiger. I paused because I was like, well, does the Serengeti have tigers? Not sure about that. I believe I am mixing my metaphors, but please forgive me. You know what I'm saying, right? You're in some, and this is, the whole classic. We were wired this way because we used to have to run away from real predators. Now we just have to run away from emails, which are are not tigers on wherever tigers are hanging out back when we were evolving. So the other little pieces of the physiological side is that little extra breath at the top really helps inflate all of your air sacs in your lungs. So you're really maximizing that intake of oxygen, and now you're pushing it all out. Okay. I love the physiological sigh. It is game changing for me. That being said, it's not always the most appropriate when, say, you're giving a talk or you're in a meeting and you're being expected to talk or have a back and forth, right? You can't necessarily sit there and be going, right? You can do little mini versions of it. Or you can very quietly breathe into yourself in a quiet little extra breath and then quietly out of the mouth. But there's other tools, right? So this is why you gotta build up different tools in your toolbox so you have other things to grab on. So another thing I really like to grab on that I use a lot when I'm interacting with people is what I'm going to call mini havening. So for those of you who have done havening, havening is this whole technique. Now, I haven't been formally taught havening by, say, a therapist or a coach, so I'm a little bit less familiar with it. But my understanding is that the basics, there's always a touch component, touching yourself in a very normal way, right? Not a weird way. Usually starting with hand rubs. Katie might be trying to walk across the keyboard, so if you hear weird noises, that's what's happening. All right, sorry, back to mini happening. So usually you start with rubbing your hands gently together, and then you can kind of rub your arms. And then happening might include other components like visualization or eye movements. So what I call mini happening is just that very first piece of gently rubbing your hands together, but taking one piece of your brain, all right? One piece of your brain is sort of interacting with what's going on out there, but just a gentle little piece of your brain that says, hey, Okay, let's say that, I've got my left hand in a bit of a fist and my right hand over my left hand, and I'm just very gently, very slightly rubbing. And I'm just like, okay, how does it feel for my left hand to be gently rubbed by my right hand? It feels nice. My skin's really dry. I should probably lotion. Okay, right hand, how does it feel to very gently rub that left hand? That feels caring, pleasant. The hand is really dry. You should definitely lotion, girl. Right? So what you're doing is you're bringing yourself back to the here and now physically. You're grounding yourself in a way to say, it's all right. Things are happening, but I'm safe. Hell, sometimes I'll even just throw in a quick, I'm safe when I'm doing this. I used this last week. I think I mentioned this on a different episode. I had an uncomfortable conversation with my boss that came out of nowhere that I was surprised by. And old Anna would have, I would have started flushing. I would have started like feeling that rush of cortisol and whatever else is happening when you feel like you're being threatened. I would have had a hard time staying present. I would have had a hard time listening. I would have had a hard time not defending myself. I didn't need to defend myself, right? All I needed to do was listen. My boss was handing me a very gentle package of, hey, you need to think about this thing that might be going on and is yours to explore, right? You're the management person of this team, and there might be a management problem. Go figure it out. That's all he was doing. But that's really freaking threatening if you're not resourced and you're not ready to deal with it. So while I was listening to him, I just sat there, just very subtly, left hand in a fist, right hand just gently rubbing, thinking, okay, yeah. I was probably thinking about my dry hands then too, because wintertime, dry hands. I also had a little piece of my brain saying, you are safe. You're okay. It's all right to be here. So let's recap a little bit. I think that we have a general idea around, yeah, there's these tools out there that could probably help me, but maybe less of an idea of there's a lot of tools out there that can give you that grounding in the moment, that snapping you back to the here and now, that quick little, hey, nervous system, we're safe. Hey, nervous system, it's okay. Hey, we're not being chased by a lion or tiger. Oh my, we're okay. We're here. Things are happening, but it's not the end of the world. Things are gonna be all right. So I think for my learn and move your feet, because I really do think that we talk a lot about these strong foundation things that build you up over time, and they're crazy important. Like I say, I'm going to do another episode on meditation. I think movement is great. I think socializing is great. Good personal care, meals with protein, fat, and fiber. Pff, PFFF, hydration. I think I put one too many F's in that, but that's fine. PFF. There we go. Right. Those are all super important, but it's also really important to be able to be okay in the moment so that you can actually walk away and later on you go, oh yeah, I had that kind of sticky conversation with my boss that I didn't really enjoy, but I was all right. Nothing terrible happened. I'm really proud of how I handled that. Awesome. You know? So for the learn and move your feet, I'm going to encourage you guys to choose and deploy one in the moment technique. So I gave you two. I gave you the physiological sigh. So that's one big breath in through your nose, one small breath at the top, just to really fill everything up, and then slowly out through your mouth, slower than when you breathed in. And the other one was the mini happening, is what I'm calling it, which is just a very gentle hand rubbing, or you could do a wrist rubbing or arm stroke, or maybe, maybe your hands are under the table and you just want to gently rub the tops of your thighs and think about, okay, how does it feel for my thighs to be gently rubbed right now? How does it feel for my hands to gently rub my thighs, right? Whatever that looks like for you, experiment a little bit, see what sticks. I want you to choose and deploy one of those in the moment techniques. And I would do it, like I mentioned when I first learned about the physiological sigh or cyclic sighing. I really liked using it right out the gate when I was driving and something stressful and freaky happened out, right? That's not the time for me to be gently rubbing my hands right now. I'm driving with one steering wheel and no, breathing technique was perfect there. I didn't have anyone else in the car. I was just like, oh, we're going to bust through about 3, 5 sets of these and I'm going to feel better. Try it out, see what you think. Maybe add in another one. And also, like, you don't have to use the crisis in the moment, snap you back to the here and now tools when you're just in crisis. And in fact, it's really powerful and important to practice these things when you're not in crisis so that it's there ready for you to go when you do hit something uncomfortable, when you do hit something that you need a little bit more help to move through. So you could just practice physiological sighs on a walk, getting up in the morning, in the shower. I actually do physiological sighs in the shower nowadays, and I love it. I don't really love showering. I find it kind of boring. I don't know, right? Sometimes I have shower thoughts, but frankly, doing the physiological sigh has been really helpful for me to just sort of ground down, get through the shower, be done, right? So practicing these tools outside of stressful times is really helpful and makes it so that one, it's easy for you to grab in the moment, as I mentioned, and two, it starts to also build that baseline, right? There's other studies with the physiological sigh, also out of the Huberman lab, and I believe another lab, that they had participants do 3 or 4 different types of breathing techniques daily, I think for about a month, for 5 minutes. And they saw that the physiological sigh, so just doing physiological sighs for 5 minutes in a row every single day, led to the largest positive outcomes in terms of stress relief and mindset shifts and everything. So learn to move your feet, choosing to play one of these in the moment techniques, physiological sigh, mini happening. If you're not really excited about either of these, you can go look up breathing techniques. You can start to find the resources that work for you. And I'm sure I will talk about other ones as we go along, but I'm trying not to dump too much per episode on you. I get overwhelmed, right? I tend to binge podcasts, so you might be binging. Regardless of whether you are or not, I tend to be that person who's like, I'm going to listen to 25 Mel Robbins podcasts in a row. And Mel Robbins is great, but gosh dang it, every single episode, not every single episode, but gosh, it feels like some of those episodes, it's like 7 ways to do this thing, 4 ways to do this thing. And it's all right. Well, okay, if on average every single episode has 5 things and then there's 25 episodes, well, my mental math skills are embarrassingly poor, but I pulled out my calculator, really my terminal shell on my computer, and 25 times 5 on average is 125 new techniques that I just learned in the week that I binged those 25 episodes. No way in hell I'm going to get 125 things in my brain and, out into practice in reality. So I'm trying to make the tools I put into each episode a little smaller, a little bit more manageable. I try to just narrow us down to one, learn and move your feet so that we can feel like we're actually making progress instead of just sort of learning a bunch of stuff, getting excited, and then being like, ah, shit, I spent all that time listening to those things and I can remember maybe one of the 125, which is still better than none. Let's take the win. You learned one, but we could also do better than that, right? All right. Song of the week. Dude, I love the song Midnight City by M83. I might be pronouncing their band name wrong, but it's literally M83. Maybe M83? That probably makes more sense. M83. I did not know the name of the song until I heard it on a TV show recently, and I was like, what is that song? I love this song. And so I looked it up and finally figured it out. I would try to sing the intro to you, but it will ruin the song for you, so I will not. I'm just going to say, go look up Midnight City, M83. I'll link a YouTube in the show notes. It's so fun. It's such a pump-up jam. The sax at the end is ridiculous. I love it. I play tenor sax and baritone sax on the side, and at some point I should probably just learn that sax solo. It's probably an alto now that I think about it, but whatever. You can translate to tenor. It's not that hard. Anyways, such a jam. I love it. Awesome. Thank you again for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, it would mean a lot if you shared with a friend. You can subscribe to this podcast on your podcast app. You can follow us on social, Instagram at STEMdenity. Music was by XSS, also on Instagram. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated with my research and teaching roles at Colorado State University, but it is a part of my belief that we can all have jobs that we love. And as a part of that, if you're interested in working with me directly, if you feel like, hey, Anna could be a good team member for the team that you're building up to support you in finding your most amazing STEMdenity self, I offer a free 30-minute work audit call. We can dive into your biggest work blockers, talk about things, figure out a plan for moving forward, moving towards the person you want to be at work and the job that you want to have. The link for that scheduling is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.